Welcome, City Church, to our weekly devotions in the season of Lent. Today, we're going to look at Exodus chapter 12, particularly the Passover, and we're following the theme of pace of grace in the wilderness. So far, the Israelites have not come out of Egypt yet, because the wilderness is the place where we live, work, and play. This is our daily rhythm, and it's very difficult. But before even Israel gets out of Egypt, today this devotion on Passover is the last time they will be in Egypt before the wilderness. So today we're going to see for the last time how the Israelites will be freed from slavery in Egypt. And if you've read the Exodus account, what you'll find is that the first 9 plagues in Egypt, it moved the needle a little bit for Pharaoh to release Israel, but it never really happened. But the last plague here, the 10th plague, would force Israel to be out of Egypt. That's what we're going to look at. I'm going to tie that with the Lenten series on the pace of grace. So in Exodus 12, we're not going to read this passage, but it really it describes specific directions of how to celebrate the Passover. There's a preparation, and there's a meal, and what to do, and there's all kinds of instructions there. So how does that relate to pace of grace? It does it this way. Because the description of the Passover, how to understand it and celebrate it correctly the way God intends, is deliberate. It is slow and it is intentional. In fact, the first few verses you could see, because there's a lot of descriptions there. And for Israel, in order to take the Passover correctly the way it is intended, Israel had to listen carefully. In a sense, they had to take notes very carefully. They had to follow specific instructions. In order to prepare the sacrificial lamb, has to be done precisely the way it is prescribed. Even eating it, there's certain ways to eat the Passover lamb. Baking the bread is not for taste, but just merely out of obedience, because it has to be unleavened bread. And there are many, many details in chapter 12 that meets God's specific specification for the Passover meal. Now, for the church, we no longer need to observe the Passover, right, in the way that's prescribed in Exodus 12, because we know as followers of Jesus, He fulfilled the purposes of Passover. And on Good Friday, we see that. And on Easter, we celebrate that. But we must continue to exercise, even though Jesus did fulfill all that. For us today in the Lenten series, we must continue to exercise the heart of Passover. And what is that? To observe our hearts. And to do that, it takes time. Slowing down and see what our hearts are saying, as well as the attitudes of our hearts, especially during this Lenten season. And the Lenten season prescribes that we slow down, we pray, we fast, we seek God. And so in the spirit of Passover, that's where the connection comes in. We are in the middle, we're right in the midst of Lent, and this season is leading us to prayer and fasting, and for some, giving up indulgences, whatever they may be. And all of these things that you do and that you're participating, these are acts, these are ways to be intentional to do 2 things. And 2 things that I hope that we can do. One is to hear from God. And secondly, if we do it well, we would realign our lives with God. First, we have to listen because God is always speaking. And we must listen. And it's hard to listen because there's too much clutter and noise around our lives, even our daily routine. And we need to hear from God. And that's why, during the season, we are inviting you to fast. We're inviting you to come on Saturdays and worship God and pray, not only collectively, but at home during the season, praying. And that is one way to listen to God. Second is to realign our lives. In chapter 12, after this elaborate instruction about the Passover, I want to just read one verse. This is what happened in verse 28. Then the people of Israel went and did so, all of the commandments here in Exodus 12, As the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. And that is an alignment. When you hear from God and you actually do what God tells you, that is alignment. And I'm excited for us because God is not only calling us, but He's calling us to realign our lives with what He wants for us in this season. So we got to do this. Soon we will celebrate our Passover, which is on Good Friday and Easter. But in the meanwhile, I'd like for us to hear God's specific word for each of you and me during this Lent. And along with the people of Israel, let's do what the Lord commands. So let's continue to fast. Let's continue to pray. Let's continue to worship God. And let's continue to seek His face and His grace during this season of Lent. So God bless you, and we'll see you next week.